Hi guys, this is Ryan Wilmot with www.cellochallenges.com. I'm so glad to have you here today. I'm excited about this because it gives me a chance to stop practicing for a little bit and just to talk about music, and I don't nearly get as many opportunities as I would like to discuss music. And so if you're new to the Cello Challenges, which this is the very first one, of course you're new to these specific ones, the way that this works is every other week or every week there will be a Cello Challenge issued, and you basically take the PDF and download it, and then you read your Cello Challenge and you post it to social media at cellochallenges.com, either on Facebook or Instagram, or you can just go to YouTube and then I'll issue out the challenge sometimes with a video, but primarily it's just going to be through an email, or you can go to the site. So if you're a beginner, this is a perfect place for you. If you're an intermediate or an advanced player, I would just go to www.cellochallenges.com and download that PDF because this video is primarily just going to be talking about how we count the Dvorak Cello Concerto, the opening. That's our main focus for this video. So if you're here and you're new, I want to welcome you, and let's just dive right into this here. If we haven't listened to the Dvorak Cello Concerto, I would take this opportunity to go ahead and listen to it now. It's fantastic. I love how this one opens up, right? And it's a kind of cool way. It's kind of heroic in a way. It always reminds me of like a heroic moment when we hear bam 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 bam. Right, it's this really powerful thing that's happening with the cello. It's almost like wailing. Anyways, we're here to talk about the counting of this, and one thing I know for myself that was hard with counting is that it's so easy to believe that we understand how to count something just by listening. So if we've listened to it, we kind of get a sense for how this rhythms work, but we want to know how to count them. If we look at the screen, our score, the lowest value note that we have, low value, is actually this 16th note. All right, 16th note. So the reason why I'm making that an observation, that's this guy right here. If we have a 16th note on the page, we can use that to help us count the music that we're looking at. And the way that we actually do that is first we figure out, the note values that we have other than that, but more importantly, we assign an imaginary click track to all of our score. And then whenever we encounter those pieces of music that have those notes, we're able to line them up perfectly with those notes. So I'm just drawing a whole bunch of 16th notes on the page. What we're going to be talking about here is called subdivision counting, right? You may have called it something else, but that's kind of what I'm going to call it here. And it kind of makes sense whenever we think about the hierarchy of notes. So what's subdivision? If we divide something in half, right, it's divided. And then we could subdivide that, and then we could, of course, subdivide that subdivision. It's super, almost gets to the meta stage of things, right? So we have a whole bunch of 16 notes written here. And what we're going to try to do is basically line up our quarter notes, our dotted quarter notes, our half notes with those notes. So I'm going to go ahead and write the beginning for the Dvorak Cello Concerto here and line up the notes so that we kind of get a sense for where things are happening. Okay, so that's one measure of our music. So here we have these notes written down. We have the dotted quarter note followed by some 16th notes followed by a half note. This is actually what Dvorak has written here, minus the actual names of the notes that we're playing and the staff and everything. So here we have the values abstracted, and what we've done is we've inserted our 16th notes on top of these notes. The Dvorak Cello Concerto, if we go back here right before this, the time signature is 4/4 time. What that means is that 4 beats happen for every measure. That's what this one equals, 4 beats. And then this bottom one is saying the quarter note is assigned the value of the beat. But what that kind of looks like if we drew on a piece of paper quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if we had a click track, click, 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 click. And we just do that over and over again. It's an imaginary click that's happening. Click, 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 click. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we wanted to assign notes to be bigger than that or smaller than that, then we would of course just write them down on the page. So if we had the 1, 2, 3, 4, imagine if we just wrote down, 2 eighth notes instead of the quarter notes. The quarter notes are still driving the music. They're still pulsing through. We still have that click track going, or metronome, but instead of us saying click, 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 now we need to get 2 notes inside of the value of one of those clicks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and right. Da 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 da. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Of course, we don't want. I don't think count as 1 2 1 2, but we get the sense, right, that we have to have 2 of these to equal 1 of these. And all we're going to do is divide that one more time. So let's draw one more thing down here so we get the sense of this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that ends it right there. So we would have here, instead of the normal 1 2 3 4, the click 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 click, now we're actually going to speed things up quite a bit. And when I say speed up, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to go faster. It just means that we have to get more notes inside of the value of one of our clicks. Let me try to make that as evenly distributed as I can. So what I'm drawing here on the page are 16th notes. Right. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we come here and say 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and notice the click is still happening, but the speed of those notes as we have to play them increases, right? We have to think a little bit quicker on our feet. We can of course slow the tempo down, so the click is, let's say we're going a little bit slower. Click, 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 click. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, or da 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 da. Right. So how do we count that here? We're getting now to the music here, right? So if we have this and we're saying, okay, we have 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, so let's go ahead and put some of those countings there. The way that we count this, let me draw it out here instead of there. We put the value of the beginning of the note. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? For every single note, we're going to put down the actual representation of where that lands in terms of our horizontal value. So 1 is at the beginning, 2 is next to it, 3 and 4. The next thing that we're going to add in order to get this counting here, we're going to put a plus sign followed by an E followed by a. So this is a way that we can actually begin to verbalize some of these values if we have to verbalize it. And I do find it really useful to say something whenever we're practicing, not internalize it so much, because music is a lot about expression, and sometimes expression comes through audible representations of the sounds that we're trying to mimic. So here for this one we say 1E. So sorry, 1E and oh my mistake, guys, my mistake 100%. Let's go ahead and erase these here. And put them here. There we go. That makes more sense. So what we're saying is 1, the letter E And this here, the way that we say this guy is we say and then this is right? So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and or here 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and each one of these guys represents a 16th note on the page. So as we're counting them, we're able to evenly distribute our sound as we play our notes, right? So here, this is 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and right? So how does that help us in any way? If we take a look at our music here, notice here the 1 happens in line with this one here. So I'm going to try to draw a little red mark here to kind of indicate where these values are existing and how long we have to hold the note for before we separate it and put it onto another note. So there's those. Those are 2 16 notes. There's our 3E and 4E and right. So if you imagined that we had a click track going, right? So our click track is giving us hits for 1, 2, 3, 4, click, 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 right? But now instead of just keeping it as click, click, or 1, 2, 3, 4, put the counting in place. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and click, click, 3E and 4E. Just keep that pulsation going. And what we're going to find here is we now have the values in proper places. So 1, if we were playing the cello, this note right here, regardless of if you want to pick up your instrument and play this, if you held out the bow stroke long enough on this note, you would hold it for 1E and 2E, and then we would get ready for another bow stroke, and right? So da 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 da. That's how we would play that music. So I'm just gonna represent it as a hit this time. Hit, 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 hit. Right. So we can slow down the counting even more than that, and we can get those notes in the proper place. So once again, each one of these here is the actual note that's written for our score, but we're putting imaginary counting in place here so that we're able to properly line up these notes for where they're supposed to be. So 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and right. And if we take a look at our music, we now have the first 2 little measures here as far as our rhythms go. We're going to play them the exact same way. So just to review, what we've done is we've taken the values that we can count in our score and we've brought it down to the lowest value that's available, in this case the 16th note. That 16th note, if we imaginarily put it down as the counting for our music, the quarter note gets the beat, right? So there's 4 beats per measure, the quarter note gets the beat. So imaginarily, our click track, every time we hear a click, 1, 2, 3, 4, it represents our quarter note. But if we're not used to counting and comparing quarter notes without any assistance, it might be value to divide that beat, or in this case, subdivide the beat into smaller values so that we can absolutely hear where our next beat is supposed to land. So in this case, we've subdivided our quarter note into 16th notes, right? So we can see it takes 16 quarter notes, or 16 16th notes in order to represent 4 quarter notes. But we're just going to put those 16 notes on top of our quarter notes, our imaginary spots where they're supposed to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we've inserted on top of that our 16th notes, 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and right. So that's our subdivision for this opening passage. The last part here that we need to get a sense of are these guys right here. A dotted eighth note followed by a 16th note. As was mentioned, I think before, maybe I put this on a different video, but a dot in our music, a dot equals value of the note that it's attached to plus half of that value horrible writing, guys. Anyways, so if we have a dot attached to a note, if we don't have it here, I didn't really explain this, I don't think, but if we have a dot attached to the note, it's the value of this note already. This note exists, so it has to have its own value, and then we have to have half of the value of that. So if you want to pause this video and answer the question, if you had a dotted half note, what would half of the value of a half note be? If you went ahead and paused the video and answered that question, the answer to that would be a quarter note. A quarter note represents half of the value of a half note. So we could do that with other notes too. If we had an eighth note, half of the value of an eighth note is 2 16th notes. It takes 2 16th notes to equal 1 eighth note. And we can continue to divide that over and over again. But now that we know that, this value here, if we have a dotted eighth note, which is what's represented here, half of the value of an eighth note is a 16th note. So if we can redraw this little passage here, it would look something like this. And once again, this is the value of using our 16th notes as the basis for our counting. It would look like this. We would have a eighth note that's actually tied to a 16th note, because we're inserting two invisible, I say two, but we're inserting an invisible 16th note to add to the value of this. But this, what's written right there, is the exact same value as this, right? It's played the exact same way. It's just written a little bit differently. But we don't really need that representation here. We can just use our 16th note as the basis for our counting. So let's go ahead and draw out the last measure here that we have for the Dvorak Cello Concerto for the opening, and this should wrap up the video. We have da. Okay, so I've written down here the last measure here. I've just taken out the rhythm from here in the music, and I've put down here their values. And what I'm going to do is the exact same thing I did before, where I've drawn out my 16th notes over my original note values so that I know exactly where they're supposed to land whenever I play them on the cello. Okay, let's do 2 more of these. Like I said, this should be the thing that wraps us up here for the opening of this cello concerto. We're going to add in one last thing here. Sorry, I know I said that was the end, but I want to add in one more tip here to help us with things. So we're doing the exact same counting that we had before. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you recall, before we just added in the 1E and the 2E and the, so we don't necessarily have to write those out, but I guess we could go ahead and do that. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and okay, so now that we have those written out, we can actually visually see where those beats land with our music. So in this case, 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and so as we're playing our cello, we're not playing these 16th notes right here. We could just practice doing 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and we could do that just to get us in the sense of where these notes are going to land. But really, we're playing da 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 1E and da 2E and da 3E and 4E and trying to accent those notes for you guys. So what we would do, making sure this is 100% clear, these values right here would represent this part, and then this would be the only thing that we play on this bow stroke. So that's its own thing. We play these guys together, or we hold the value of these notes here by themselves, and then we play the by itself again, and then of course our 3 and our 4 would be here. So just making sure that we're clear on that. We would only play our bow for as long as this time represents. So 1 E and then we change our bow stroke. We play this note, da, 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. But we'd have to hold our bow long enough here so this would be one hold for each one of those clicks. So if we set up the metronome as 1 E and 2 E and. Let me actually get a metronome primed and ready for this so that I can actually put the counting on top of this, because it's really hard to give you guys an accurate representation of this with me just using my own voice. I want to add in a metronome here, so give me 1 second. So I've started a counter to help us with this. So imagine now each one of those, each one of those is our 16th note that's happening. Those little runs up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we're inserting on top of that, or we're inserting our imaginary click, 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 right? So we need to add in our bow strokes, and we're going to make sure that we land them in. Let me slow it down just a tad so that we have a better way to count it, so we're not rushing too much. All right, so let's get ready. 1 E and da, 2 E and da, 3 E and 4 E and da, 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 da. Da, da. And there we have it. We have our opening for the Dvorak Cello Concerto in terms of our counting. Now, obviously, this video didn't cover the notes that we have there, but what we can do, and this is the tip I wanted to mention, was we can actually articulate with our voice the sounds that we're hearing as we listen to the concerto. So notice the phrasing here is really powerful. We have this forte that just is huge, and it says quasi improvisando. So it's like this kind of, you are keeping yourself in rhythm, but you have a little bit of leniency here to play with this sound a little bit. But if we listen to the concerto, it should line up pretty well with the counting that we just learned. Vam, 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 vam. Vam, right? Super intense and loud, and we have a little bit of room to stretch there, but not too much. We have an orchestra behind us, and we won't want to mess anybody else up. But yeah, I hope you guys got something out of that video. I know there's a lot of stuff to cover, but next time we're gonna have a cello challenge that might be a little bit easier, but I wanted to start off with something ambitious and something cool. It's a nice summer project, or it's a nice project to break you away from your normal lesson time. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll put more videos up later at different dates. And also too, go head over to www.cellochallenges and then check out the other cello challenges as they're released weekly or bi-weekly. This is Ryan Wilmot with cellochallenges.com. I'll see you guys there.